full time here at the Etihad Stadium. Newcastle United have lost in the FA Cup quarter-final to Manchester City 2-0. Bernardo Silva's two deflected goals in the first half, the difference, and really that sort of told the story, to be honest, that Man City turned up, scored 2 goals, and that was kind of it. And that's disappointing when you think about what this game should and could have meant to Newcastle coming here. Good chance to go back to Wembley, another game closer to a cup final, another game closer to a cup win as well. Obviously not since 1969 has that happened, and it didn't really feel like that was the sort of occasion on the line for Newcastle tonight. It didn't really feel like they had the sense of something that they could grasp. I think yes, there's a gulfing class clearly when you come here to the Etihad. Just outside, the whole thing is very sort of, you get the sense of how daunting the task will be. It's very a vast place. The complex is huge, and you sort of see how much the influx of cash has done for Man City since 2009 when the Abu Dhabi group took over. And really this is another lesson, and it's not just the first time, this has happened quite a lot of times. There's another lesson that showed how far Newcastle still have to go to close that gap. That this is kind of the level that the Saudi Arabian Public Investment Fund want Newcastle to get to, but they're absolutely miles off it, because there was just, I think the best way to describe it is, I think Newcastle played quite fairly well. They were, certainly in the first half, they were good early on before Silva's first goal, which was a shot that deflected off Dan Burn. He was allowed to walk into the box, which was difficult, but I think with Silva, he's a master of always being spare. He just finds the space where other players don't, and that includes defenders don't see it. So he walks into the box and tries to curl an effort. Burn deflects it past Dubravka, 1-0, and it's already an uphill battle from there, really. I mean, Newcastle created sort of, I wouldn't say many chances, but there were good opportunities in the midfield in terms of finding Gordon, finding Murphy, finding Isak. There was space that Newcastle could exploit in the midfield, and that carried on a little bit until the second goal went in on just after 30 minutes, and it was basically a carbon copy. Silva's curling an effort into the bottom corner past Dubravka, but this time it deflects off Sven Botman's head instead of Dan Burn, and then it just felt like that was it from Newcastle's perspective. It didn't really feel like there was much to come from them. Having said that, there were still 2 chances for Isak. One in the first half when he gets a bit of space, fires at Stefan Ortega, who makes a decent save, but really from that, with the amount of space and the amount of quality he's got from that range, he really should be scoring that chance. And then it's 2-1, and then it's a bit of like, oh, okay, we'll see what goes on here. But I must say that it wasn't like those chances were being peppered. It wasn't like Ortega was being peppered. It wasn't like there was a guarantee of anything coming after that. But you've got to take those chances. And then the second half, Almiron comes on as a part of a 4-man substitution with Elliot Anderson, Louis Miley, and Lewis Hall, and he creates a chance for Isak, who, again, his touch just let him down, and the chance went just past him by. And that's kind of the thing, that when you come to these places, and City, we've been here with PSG and Dortmund as well, with Joe Linton's chance in Dortmund, we were sort of saying the same thing. And actually in that video I sort of said that yes, the fine margins were there and there were opportunities, but Newcastle were never really in the game, and it kind of felt like that a little bit. They huffed and puffed, but Man City were the team that blew them away without really getting out of second gear. And as I say, it's so testament to the quality of Guardiola's tactics and coaching and the intelligence of the players that he's got. I thought Silva was magnificent in terms of the ability to constantly look for space, constantly find space, constantly be spare all the time, and it looked like Newcastle were a man down whenever City attacked, because the transitions were so quick. They had Doku, who his pace was just causing so many issues for Jamal Lascelles. Jacob Murphy was playing in wing back. Newcastle started with a 3-5-2 formation. Dan Burn on the other side. He was everywhere because they knew they could get them in that space. And I've said so many times in so many games this season, it's been a real theme that Newcastle have left that space in between the midfield and the attack. But when you come to a place like this, as with Arsenal a few weeks ago, that's when the punishment happens. But City didn't really need to turn up that much. There was a sense that everyone on the ground knew that the game was done in the second half. And yes, Doku caused a save for Dubravka, and Haaland ran through and just shot wide, and Guardiola hit over the bar. But really, there weren't that many chances. And then obviously Isak's at the other end. But there weren't many chances in the second half. It was a bit of a dead game, really, because everybody knew that City were, had pretty much done it. And there's a sort of air of, it's not entitlement or expectation, it's just when you come here and win so often, it just sort of feels like that's what's going to happen. And the opposition really has to believe in something different. And we've seen that happen on the odd occasion when Brentford came here last season. Crystal Palace have come in here in recent times and won. Whenever Liverpool come here, there's a bit of an occasion because there's a sense that the opposition believes in something that can happen. Whereas last season, if Newcastle came here this time a year ago, you'd think, yeah, there'd be an opportunity to really attack them. But there just wasn't anything. And yes, there were decent little passages of play and their structure was good. I thought that Eddie Howe set them up fairly well in the first half. They weren't sitting deep, they were sitting a sort of mid-block in the midfield. They were finding those little pockets, as I mentioned earlier. But there just wasn't enough conviction because there isn't enough belief that they can actually come here and win this game. And it was really telling that as soon as they got through Blackburn, which was obviously very, very lucky in so many ways because of the penalties, because of the way they sort of rode their luck in that game, it was like we got through a difficult point there, and the fans, it was a real sense of there's an opportunity if the right draw. And then they drew City here, and it took the wind out of their sails. And there's been obviously a history of really tough draws this Cup. They've had Manchester United in the League Cup, they've had obviously PSG, Dortmund and Milan in the Champions League. They're used to sort of tough, big sort of draws. But in previous times, it's been a reason it's been a call to arms, a chance to really show something, and everyone comes together. It was certainly the case for the Champions League draw. It was like, bring it on. Whereas this time it felt like as soon as the draw happened, that was it, and everybody just sort of settled into that sort of pattern of thinking. And that's really, really disappointing when you consider, what was at stake here tonight. Newcastle had Anthony Gordon back, they had Alexander Isak, they had Bruno Guimaraes on the pitch. And after the Man City game in the league at St James's in January, I said on a video that I thought Newcastle could finish in the top 6 because of how well they played when those three players were on song, and how when those three players were, clicked and took them to a new level, and everyone sort of fitted around them. It didn't happen tonight. Bruno was nowhere to be seen against Rodri. I didn't really see what sort of impact he made. Isak obviously had those two opportunities, didn't really make much of them. Gordon obviously clearly not struggled with fitness, obviously big for him to be named in the England squad, but sort of came off against Chelsea, wasn't really fit, and you could tell that. So when those three players are fired, and cause a lot of teams, for even the best teams, as they did at St James's in that game. Obviously they lost it 3-2, but I was really convinced that they challenged City, they put City on the back foot. And yes, it's the Etihad, yes, it's a different game, and yes, Newcastle are struggling a lot, and it's been a few weeks since that game, but there was none of that belief from the very start. There was a good structure and a good sort of we'll see how it goes sort of attitude, and the fans sort of backed them all the way. There was nearly 8,000 fans that really didn't stop singing right in that corner over there, in that stand over there, sorry. But there was a sense that, yeah, Newcastle came into this game and just sort of wanted to see what they could do, and they rolled over as soon as the first goal went in, and that's really, really disappointing when you consider that Wembley was on the cards here. If they won here today, they could have been going to Wembley. You saw what Coventry did to Wolves earlier. That's a real opportunity. If they get Coventry at Wembley, they go into that game as favourites, and yeah, then who knows what happens from there. That's all ifs, buts and maybes. It's obviously not going to happen now, but I think and obviously, you come to the Etihad, you expect a tough team. City are a very, very good side, and that is what you get. But the disappointment for me is the sort of collective lack of belief from everybody. There was a sense that nobody knew, no one really fancied themselves tonight. No one stood up and put in a performance and showed what they could do like they did at Old Trafford. You've got to remember, this is the same club who went to Old Trafford and played a very strong looking Manchester United team off the park without a number of key players. Most of the key players were playing tonight. Yes, they've still got injuries. Yes, they're still fatigued. All those things that have been punctuated the season throughout. Yes, that's all a factor, but they had a strong team out. Elliot Anderson came on and did quite well. There was enough in that squad to at least give it a go this evening, and they started well, as I said, but as soon as the first goal went in, it felt like game over. It was done, and that's a real shame considering what could have been if they had turned up and given Man City a challenge. Everybody here didn't get out second gear. That includes the fans. It's not a criticism of Man City fans. It just shows that how much you have to be on it to even stand a chance at such a vast stadium like this against the quality of Pep Guardiola's side. And Newcastle didn't even get near to showing what they could do, and that's ultimately the massive shame of tonight. And you know, I've said before the game, I don't think the season's over. Despite everything, Newcastle are still in the hunt for Europe, and with possibly 8 teams playing in Europe next season from the Premier League now, that's an opportunity. So the season isn't done yet, but this is a massive blow to what could have been. You know, if they win here today, it's a big tall ask, and I hope you're not thinking that it's blasé of me to say that. But if they come here and somehow win the game, then there's a massive opportunity to sort of make this a historic season, the most amazing season in 2-3 generations. You wouldn't have sensed that was on the cards tonight just by the lack of belief and lack of anything really from Newcastle from the 13th minute when City went ahead, and that's an ultimately big shame. It's not a criticism of the way that they performed, it's just a whole sort of mindset thing, engulfing class between City and Newcastle right now, and that's obviously something that they'll have to work on closing over the next few years. I'm currently on my train, had to dash to the mix-up. It was very unsuccessful in doing so, and then I had to dash from my train, so apologies I couldn't do an outro. Please do, don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.